Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
All right, back alongside Bo Parrish. I'm Dave Erickson, and today's topic is influence. And, when I think of the word influence, I think of the book by Dale Carnegie from back in 1936 of how to win friends and influence people. And when I hear the word influence, I think convincing people to do something you want, but you have a positive spin on the word influence.
Well, Dave, I'm glad you mentioned Dale Carnegie's book. And even though it was over 70 years ago, the principles that were communicated are still more than relevant today in this fast-paced society that we live in. And that's simply influence is taking a sincere interest in those with whom we associate. Obviously, we have different levels of relationship with different people in our lives. But those that mean the most to us are the ones that we spend the most time with. Our friends, our closest friends. I know that term has gotten way too loosely used in this day and age, but a friend is someone that you can trust to the end no matter what. And if I were to ask you now, Dave, who are your closest two friends, you would be able to answer me without hesitation. And I could ask of those same two people and would probably hear that you indeed were a true friend. And that's simply you've earned the right over time to be heard in those relationships. The influence has come because you've proven to them that you sincerely care about what is most important to them. And so some of the principles that Dale Carnegie spoke about in his book way back in 1936 is to ask deep, thoughtful questions that are going to resemble profound truths on what matters most to people. Because if you've ever been in a conversation, number one, if the person's not making eye contact with you, they're not with you. If they're asking you questions that are superficial in nature, you can pick up on that pretty quickly. That person doesn't care what your name is. They don't care where you're from. They don't care what you do for a living. They're simply trying to fill that awkward silence with surface level questions, which sadly lead to surface level conversations. And that's certainly no way to exercise influence in the way that you and I are discussing today. On the flip side, I'll mention you brought up in our intro how the word influence carries a certain negative connotation with it. I think you used the word convince. Well, convince carries with it the notion of high pressure, uncomfort, awkward type situations where you are being asked to do something that you're not completely okay with on the surface. I think of the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, where Alec Baldwin comes in as the slick sales manager, pressuring his two salespeople. And I think one of them was Jack Lemmon into doing whatever it took to make the sale. And he talked about a certain set of leads that were supposedly as pure or as good as gold. And they were trying to figure out ways how to get that source of leads. Well, ultimately, that's a list that is going to lend itself to convincing and asking people to do something outside of what it is they feel comfortable with. Whereas the type of influence you and I are discussing, and it's exactly what Dale Carnegie referenced in his book, is influence in the expression of care and concern. And the way that that comes out is when we can substantially and significantly spend time with the person to the level where they truly believe that we care. Because if you think about relationships, the foundation is mutual admiration. If you do not know anything about that person, what is there to really admire? The only way you're going to know is if you ask. And the only way you're going to retain is if you actually listen. So in the context of any conversation, rather you just pestering someone with questions, which lends itself to interrogation, you stop, you take in, you reflect, and then ultimately you repeat what it is that you hear back. And if you get in the habit of doing that over and over again, another thing that Carnegie references to use the person's name often throughout the conversation. Not so much that it sounds cheesy, but ultimately over time, and it does take time, which true authentic relationships are not going to occur overnight. It does take time for that influence to work itself out. But once you're to that level where trust is established, you now are in a position to positively influence the thoughts, the actions, and the motives of that person until you prove otherwise.
How long do you give it with a conversation with someone you just met before you realize that that person isn't genuine, isn't authentic, and may not be worth your personal investment? For example, if I'm sitting with someone and I ask them a couple of questions, 30 seconds into it, 1 minute into it, 90 seconds into it, I haven't received a follow-up question about me, I recognize a selfishness of the person I'm talking to. I know the importance of asking questions to get a person to talk about themselves and they feel good about themselves and you're learning about them. But if there's no give and take, that one-way street seems unfruitful to me in terms of a potential relationship.
Absolutely. So let's just use the analogy of a tennis match. There's two people necessary to play a game. The ball has to go back and forth across the net, or else there really is no game. So you think about a conversation as a back and forth. Okay, there's two components. There's speaking and then there's listening. Okay, and I would actually say there is such a thing as active listening, because even though you speak by asking a question, doesn't ensure that you do the second part, which is listen. This is why we do not remember people's names. And you talk about situations where we're meeting someone for the first time. When we stop to engage in a crowd, there are multiple people around, and we are being introduced, or we simply walk up to someone we don't know and we say hello, and we stick out our hand. I'm Bo, I'm Dave. What's your name? Okay, well, it's standard etiquette for the person to reply. But if we are thinking about what it is we're going to say next, and that could either be about ourselves or it could be the next question we are wanting to ask them, we could very easily, and I'm as guilty as the next, is off actually missing what it is that is coming out of that person's mouth. And the first thing is what their name is. I mean, I do it more often than I would like to admit. And I can't use the excuse that I'm not good with names. Okay, we're all good with names if we actually listen to what it is the person is saying. That first question sets the tone for the relationship that could be for the months, for the years, for the decades to follow. If you cannot remember a person's name, and so that would actually be a great way to determine the trajectory of that future relationship. And another thing that remembering the person's name allows you to do is establish that second conversation. So you meet someone for the first time in a party, at the very least, you remember their name. What if the next week you run into them at the grocery store and they're 20 feet away? Well, you can't just say, hey, we met the other week at the party. If you say, hey, Dave, and they stop, because what's the sweetest sound to a person? It's the sound of their own name. And the fact that you remembered, well, that's going to give you a lot of points in that person's mind as far as your sincere interest in pursuing a relationship or influence in their lives. Does that make sense?
It does, but there definitely has to be a give and take, though. If that person is not returning the respect by asking you questions about you, there really is no depth to that potential relationship, is there? Do you realize maybe this is a dead end?
Sure, but it's amazing when you actually give someone the leeway to speak openly about themselves, their perception of you in whatever capacity you're operating in, they tend to view you more of an expert at your trade, at your craft, at your sport, even though you have said little to nothing about what it is that you do. The reason they feel that way is because you've given them an opportunity to speak openly about me, myself, and I. And whoever it is that afforded me that opportunity, subconsciously in the back of my mind, my thought about you is you are good at what you do, not because I've seen you operate, but because you let me talk about me. It's amazing how that works. It's a psychological phenomenon because, Dave, in reality, you think about the most successful people in the world, the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Who is giving them the opportunity to speak openly about themselves? Their wife is probably not. Their kids certainly aren't. Their employees are probably scared of them and they're not giving them an opportunity to speak. So if you, perfect stranger on the street, encounter them at a party and initiate a conversation with, hello, my name is Dave. You are? Oh, my name's Bo. Bo, what is it that you enjoy most about your work? And just shut up and see where it goes. Because you control the conversation, the more you can listen and practice that engagement. Because that engagement establishes a starting point to which you can pick back up at any time if indeed you decide to pursue that relationship. Because you are along the way building influence in that person's life, whether they realize it or not. And if they give you an opportunity, if you see them again, if your paths cross and you can regurgitate what it is that they told you the first time, that is when your influence starts to register in their mind. And they are going to be predisposed to a favorable response to whatever it is you pick up on during that second and third and fourth. And it might even be the fifth conversation before they even ask you what it is that makes you tick. And you have to be okay with that because relationships are based on sacrifice. True, lasting, authentic relationship seeks first to improve the lives of those around us rather than our own lives. And we start with improvement, just giving the person the opportunity to speak openly and honestly about whatever it is that's currently on their mind.
Now, there is an example that I remember one of the first times I really recognized the power of influence, and it was a friend of mine from my St. Louis days, and his dad was a salesperson, and they went out to golf one day, and you know how long it takes to golf 18 holes. You know, you talk about 3 hours, 3.5 hours, depends on how long it takes. And then this was a sales call in a way. He was hosting his client, and the message I got at the end of this story was that he never once talked about business. Never once talked about closing the sale. In fact, it wasn't until the end, and it was this silence of letting the other guy make the first move or let the other guy be the one who initiates the business conversation, and it set it up for a more fruitful experience at the end for his business. And it sounds like what you're talking about is, you know, you're laying the foundation. It's not the first meeting. It's not the second meeting. It's not the third meeting. But you're building a trust, you're building mutual respect, and then when it's time for you to present your ask, that person is more likely to give it.
Absolutely. And the foundation of all long-lasting, fruitful business relationships is a sincere interest in the person that you are pursuing. So in the course of this 4-hour round of golf, on day one, that's clearly not an appropriate setting to discuss a transaction, to discuss the steps that need to occur in order for the business deal to be closed. Matter of fact, if any efforts are made to do so, that person will never pick up the phone, will never answer an email, will never take you up on another social engagement because your true intent has come out. On the contrary, if you can sincerely prove your interest in the relationship, that's going to afford you the opportunity when the time is right, because truth be known, they probably already have a relationship in place, a business deal in place similar to the one that you're hoping to pursue. But just because the situation is solid now doesn't mean that there might be an opportunity in the future. And at the very least, it's going to cause your prospect to think about the quality of that relationship that's currently in place. So he may have a thought along the lines of, gosh, Dave took me to play golf at a nice course. We had lunch. He was truly engaging. He asked me thoughtful, thought-provoking questions. Gosh, I'm not so sure that my current provider has ever asked me those questions. And then if you pursue it, so another appropriate I word, although we're discussing influence, could be investment, because there is a significant investment of time that you have as a professional to be willing to commit in order to directly control, because influence and control are synonymous, but we do it in a positive, engaging, and authentic manner to where that person truly believes that we care. We've also heard that the saying that no one cares what you know until they know that you care. So how do you demonstrate care, which ultimately leads to influence? You care about people by taking a genuine interest in people, which comes in the form of questions that you are willing to listen to the response.
Boy, sounds like it's a very fine line, because if I'm out with someone on a business lunch outing or whatever, that's the premise of what we're doing. So in the back of their mind, maybe this is me overthinking it, is that they know I'm there with a motive. And to get past that suspect feeling that they may have of showing that genuine interest, how do you, this might be for a longer conversation, but if I'm there with them, they got to believe that I'm there for business purposes. I'm not there to be their friend per se. I am trying to develop a relationship, but there really is an end to this talk.
So you know that, I know that. Every major establishment that exists to facilitate meetings, whether it be fancy steakhouses or classic American diners for breakfast, at some point, the question has to come up. And that question is, can we pursue a business relationship? Can we turn whatever it is we have here into a mutually beneficial business relationship? Okay, that guy sitting or that woman sitting on the other side of the table, they're not stupid. Okay, they know what you do for a living. It's just a matter of how you position yourself and at what time you convert the conversation from friends to, let's call it, financial. Okay, because we can all be great friends, but at the end of the day, a friend in its current state does not convert to your financial security. They understand that. But we also know that relationships are the foundation for all business, social, any type of transaction. You have to lead with the relationship in order for influence to take over, because we love doing business with friends. We just have to be convinced that our friends are capable, that our friends are competent. We know they're professional, but it's amazing the quality of your questions can position you as a professional or as a joker. And if you go right in for the kill before the relationship is established, you are going to compromise your credibility and sacrifice all potential to do business with that person in the future.
Sounds like our P word may have to be patience in the future, because that sounds like it would be a key to making some of these influential meetings happen.
Absolutely. You just think about it. I mean, trust is at the core, okay? And a huge component of trust is influence, because when people trust you, they are influenced by you. When they respond sincerely to your questions, and the reason they're going to respond sincerely is because you've given them the proof that you're sincerely interested about what they have to say. Therefore, your influence is built through the quality of questions that you are able to communicate.
This was a great topic, Bo. Thanks very much on influence today with Bo Parrish.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.